Here are some of the lesser known strats and weirder game mechanics in MKWii that I've come across over the last few years. The conveyor belts on TF have some weird properties that I only recently learned about. As you might know, if you're in a Star, Mega, or TC, the conveyors won't slow you down when driving against them, but they still do boost you when driving with them. What's odd though is that they no longer carry you in the direction that they're moving, but rather in whatever direction you happen to be facing, even if you're nearly perpendicular to them, which is pretty funny to look at, if rather useless practically. For an actually useful takeaway, as a result of these properties, the red lane on the conveyor turn becomes faster than the green one, when the red one's on the left, anytime you're in a Star or TC. Naturally, you would think this would also be the case for Megas on the conveyor turn, but there's actually another weird mechanic that comes into play then. For some strange reason, Megas actually increase the speed cap above its regular value of 120 km/h. How much of an increase? Well, that depends on the vehicle. You see, every kart and bike has a hidden stat for how much they grow when a Mega Mushroom is used. And rather mysteriously, this value also acts as a multiplier to the speed cap. So for instance, the Flame Runner and its maximum allowed speed both get 1.9 times bigger in a Mega, granting a limit of 228 km/h. A big jump, but one that pales in comparison to the cheap Charger, which has the highest scale factor at a value of 2.7. So, in a sense, you could consider the Fish Car to be the true fastest vehicle in the game, being that it's the only one in any circumstance capable of hitting speeds as high as it can. Unfortunately though, the raised speed cap doesn't mean much in most circumstances, because internal velocity remains capped at 120 as normal. To break it, you need an external source of motion, such as a conveyor belt, which is how, to get back to the initial question, the green lane ends up being a smidge faster for Megas, unlike Stars and TCs. Another consequence of this strange little mechanic is that shrooming on moving road becomes actually viable, unlike at normal size where shrooming on green conveyors or in water streams will do you little to nothing. Instead, these places become essentially the same as any other random spot to shroom at. So if you want to get the most out of your shrooms, it's probably still better to hold them for a shortcut. But the option is there, perhaps most usefully to pancake your unsuspecting opponents. Finally, with gravity being an external source of motion, Megas effectively raise your terminal velocity as well. Now, it's pretty rare to be falling long enough for this to matter, but one place that it does is the moonjump on Rainbow Road. In fact, if you manage to make moonjump in a Mega, you nearly quadruple the shortcut's usual time save. Unfortunately, the only practical way to do that is getting a lucky ground shroom or draft, as far as I know. Anyone who's TT DDR knows how annoying this slip drift before wall glitch can be, since the track can just refuse to give you the air pocket you need on a whim. But I recently learned you can essentially force your bike to get air by wheelie canceling just before the little lip that makes the slip possible. This does lose a little time versus getting the slip the normal way, but it's still faster than hopping into the turn, especially if the hop was unintentional. This wheelie cancel tech can work in other places too, as long as there's the right sort of change in slope, and as long as you're going fast enough. So there could be good applications of it in other places as well, but DDR wall glitch is probably the most useful one. Acceleration in this game is kinda surprisingly complicated, and one of the strangest mechanics with it is that wheeling can actually make your bike slower at certain speeds. With Funky Flame on normal road, anytime you're between 19 and 67 km/h, wheelies will only hinder your acceleration, albeit only a little. If your base speed is altered, then the optimal wheelie speeds change accordingly. For instance, being shrunk scales your speed down by a factor of 0.7, so after a shock, roughly when you hit 47 km/h becomes the best time to start wheeling. To further complicate matters, drifting acceleration actually beats out both wheeling and driving flat from the moment it's possible all the way up to about 74 km/h. However, drift acceleration, go figure, requires you to be drifting, which is obviously not ideal if you're on a straightaway, so there can be a bit of a trade-off. In this little test I did, recovering from a Nana, just throwing in a drift from 46 to 74 saved virtually nothing. But drifting for a mini turbo turned out a decent bit faster. Bear in mind, at tiny size, it doesn't take as long to naturally get back to full speed, so it's less often going to be worth going out of your way to drift when shrunk. The exception is if you can get an MT as you resize, since then you avoid having to slowly accelerate up from shrunken speed. Here are a couple flashy looking, but actually quite easy shortcuts to add to your repertoire. BC3 cut in a Mega is really no harder than at normal size. What I think a lot of people don't realize is that you should aim farther left than usual, roughly towards the top left corner of the ramp. My guess as to why it changes is that the larger hitbox perhaps causes you to contact the yellow ramp earlier than normal. Regardless, aiming more to the left seems to work pretty well for me, with or without a shroom. With a bit of practice, you can even get a feel for no-stop Mega Cut, or Mega Ultra if you're feeling a bit quirky. Jumping to the other overpowered shortcut track.
Yeah, I just watched an entire lobby take the cut.
The respawn cut on GV with a TC or Mega is not as difficult as you might think. The trickiest bit is squeezing out a mini turbo before the edge, but beyond that, it's actually pretty lenient. With a Mega, you can consistently get across with just an MT and a wheelie. With a TC though, that method becomes much more difficult. What you can do instead is a spin hop over the gap, snapping the control stick from right to left, having ensured that you were in a sharp drift by the time you released the MT. Doing this increases airtime in the same way as TF input. You already have the bike leaning right when you hop, and then by spin hopping, you rotate it back towards neutral, giving you the upward momentum that we call TF physics. In fact, the effect is so strong that the cut is just possible even without the MT. And conveniently enough, if you don't spam your roulette at the cave set, a TC does last long enough to make it. Incidentally, this leaning spin hop tech is also what enables the hop version of Task Gap and the hop version of Star Gap on MG. When I saw this video by CampbellMop a little while back, I was surprised to learn that the fastest strategy at the end of LC is actually to skip all but the very first boost panel. It is only a slight difference, so really either way is perfectly viable, but I would never have guessed that skipping all those boosts could even come close. I should also mention, if you're shrunk, then the standard strat does become definitively faster. One last thing that kind of blew my mind when I heard it is that for any room with fewer than 12 players, the item probabilities are just a subset of the distribution for a full room. So for instance, in an 11-player room, a 7th place box is exactly the same as an 8th place box in a 12-person room. Or in a 1v1, a box in 2nd gives you the same odds as a box in 4th would in a full room. Makes sense that Nintendo would have done it like this, I suppose, but I had never realized it until like less than a year ago. Anyway, I hope you found something interesting that you didn't know before. I'll link some other cool stuff in the description to check out if you're curious, and thanks for watching.